Hello, this is Houston and welcome to Polygonal Modeling Techniques and Tools, Part 1. This is our fifth modeling class, 3D design class. And in this class, we will start putting together all the knowledge that we have so far, how to navigate, how to create objects. But now we are going to do that on a very practical way, producing tangible things. Okay, we are not going to use the tools just for the sake of using the tools. We are going to use the tools with a very specific purpose. Okay, so the objective of this class, actually the next few classes, is to approach a project, and I would like to start right now explaining that this project is big because I have to explain a lot of things. I have to explain in details what exactly I am doing, how to use the tools and the main approaches and this kind of thing. So if you want to skip some parts, you have this possibility, because as always, I usually do time codes on my videos, so you can jump to whatever part you think that suits you. But still, I have to be very precise in some specific points, and I have to explain some things in detail. So that's why those videos are kind of big. And I'm not going to say sorry for that, because I'm providing you with information, more information than I can fit in classes. Okay, so I want you to learn this thing. So that's why I'm putting a lot of effort to explain everything in details. So I decided to divide this entire project into two parts, and just to make clear how this thing is going to happen, here I can provide you like the big picture. Okay, so I'm going to start talking about the main idea and the research process, my personal process of creating anything. And right after that, we are going to jump into Maya, and we are not going to leave Maya anymore. Okay, I will start explaining the most important techniques and tools that I usually use to create things, and my approach to do those things. Okay, and we are going to start creating a project and modeling the objects and putting those objects into the scene. And I'm going to stop this part 1 with some comments about what we did, why I did things the way I did, and I'm going to talk briefly about what comes next, which by the way is the second part, where I'm going to take all the objects I modeled, and I'm going to put those objects in the scene and prepare the cameras, set the angles, and then lighting, rendering materials, and final composition inside Photoshop. Okay, and of course I'm going to close with some comments and talking about the process itself and some pitfalls that we have to be careful. And you can follow me and you can jump to whatever part you want. So this video is dedicated to the part 1. Okay, and without further ado, I would like to start with the main idea. So I have this excerpt from John Donne's poem. This poem was written on the 17th century. It's it's a long time ago, but still very actual, still resonating for a lot of people, including me. Okay, and during the recent events, I've been thinking about a lot of things, and isolation is one of those things. So as an artist, I have to think about those things, and I have to put those things into perspective to maybe try to provide insights to people about the feelings, about the ideas I would like to convey when I think about those things. So I was thinking about isolation and this idea of no man is an island entire of itself. This is beautiful, because this is something that we can find like every single day. You know, the isolation of people. They like to be like on their own words. they don't like to talk anymore. They don't share things anymore. So if you go to the bus, everybody have like their own tiny bubble and they don't want to share. So, and this is a problem for me because again, as someone who likes to interact with people, I feel the need to build bridges instead of building walls. Okay, so this poem is pretty beautiful. Here is the source if you want to read the poem, and I'm basing my work on this poem today. So thinking about that, right away I started looking for pictures, and I found literally these pictures of lighthouses near the ocean. And there is a huge contrast. It's a beautiful thing. So the saturated colors of the mountains, the grass, the dirt, the rocks, and then suddenly you see the ocean and you see the sun. It's something intangible, so you cannot touch that thing. You can admire, but you are in front of the end of the world. So if you think about it, okay, of course it's not the end of the world, but it's something very powerful. It's a beautiful image, and I start looking for other images as well. So I found this one from Mary Kay. It's super cool and conveys this idea of isolation, and it's literally the middle of nowhere, and I really like that. And right after that I found this one. This is super powerful and scary. If you have to work on this lighthouse, and I don't even know if this thing is working, but I don't care. Just to see the ocean, you know, the waves trying to devour this building. This is so powerful. This is so strong, and there is a lot of strong emotions on this picture, because although there is not a lot of color, you can feel the fear. You can feel the idea of isolation, you know. And to me, isolation and fear, they have a lot of things in common. Okay, so I like the idea of the island. I like the isolation. So I was thinking about those lighthouses in the middle of nowhere, and this one is also pretty scary. And these images, they are on my mind, you know, for a long time, you know. And I thought, okay, I need to do something about this. So I decided to start my process, and I would like to talk about my process when I try to create anything. Okay, so first of all, I like photos very much, and this is the first thing I do. I go after real life references, so real photos. I'm not looking for drawings. I'm not looking for interpretations. I'm not looking for 3D stuff. I don't want this thing. I want photos. Okay, the real world. The best thing, even better than photos, is my own eyes when I go to places and when I have these experiences. And if I cannot go, the second best choice is to use photos. That's why my process always involves photos. So the second thing I do is to go and look for illustrations, because I don't care about the quality of the illustration. I don't care about the content. I care about the style. Okay, and I try to follow that style. So if I like the style of that 3D reference, I tend to use that. So usually some people like this, for example, low poly style. I don't like low poly style because, first of all, it's very simple. First of all, yeah, you can use if you want, but at the same time, this is not a real challenge. I want a real challenge. As an artist, I have to push my boundaries every single day, and I have to feel my limits, because if I don't feel my limits, that means that I didn't push enough. Okay, it's super cool if you feel comfortable doing the same thing over and over and over. I'm so sorry for you. I am not this type of person. I'm not this type of artist. I am not even this type of professor. So every year I try to change my approach with my students. I try to create a new project. I could use the last year project, and by the way, I'm going to give you this project. Some of you already asked me that, It's totally fine. But you have to keep in mind that every year I try to produce a new one because I don't like boring stuff. Okay, and this year I'm talking about more, you know, about my process, because there's a lot of different processes, as much as, you know, artists. So every single artist have their own process. I'm talking about my process. Okay, you don't have to do the same things, by the way. Drawings. Sometimes I do drawings, but like doodles, you know, very informal drawings. But I also like to write. So I feel very comfortable trying to describe things writing, because for me, words, they are super powerful, and then they activate parts of my memory, and I tend to remember not only physical description of things, but also smells, also colors, also the light around. So I try to keep that inside my mind, and I try to remember those things, to compose different images and try to describe those things on the paper. Okay, this is my process. You don't have to do that. If you don't like to write, I would never force you to do that. Okay, and sometimes I go back and forth, because when I feel, okay, I'm going on this direction, but I would like to add new elements, so I need new references. I don't try ever to copy a work. I don't try just to reproduce something. I try to mix styles. I try to mix objects. I try to mix references. I try to bring new things to the table all the time, because I think this is, first, is a technical challenge, and second, it's a artistical challenge. You have to tell better stories all the time. Okay. And to finish this thing, I would like to talk about something I usually do, because I have a lot of experience, of course. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, it's totally fine. Someday you will start doing this kind of thing, because it's a way also not to skip parts, but to use different tools to speed up your process. And this accelerated prototyping process, I mean, you can use tools like ZBrush, for example. If you feel comfortable using ZBrush, you can use ZBrush to prototype and do a very basic thing, and on top of that thing you can iterate, and you can do better versions. I personally jump straight to Maya or Cinema 4D or 3ds Max or Blender or whatever, and I start modeling. I don't care about almost anything, because when I start modeling, I just want to capture the shapes. I just want to have like an idea of what I'm going to have at the end. And I don't care about scale, I don't care about rules, I don't care about anything. I just start modeling, and this makes me very happy, because when I start doing this kind of thing, I just have to care about one thing: the proportion of the objects. You know, when you compare the objects inside the scene against each other, of course. I don't care about anything else. Okay, so this accelerated prototyping process is something I use. It's something a lot of people use, and in the future you will probably adopt something like that. Okay, if you go to a company, they probably ask to respect all the steps. So there's always artists doing drawings and sketches and concepts, and after the concept you can work on top of the concept. So you cannot be that creative, I would say, because someone already approved that thing, so you have to follow. Okay, so in this case, since I'm doing this thing for myself, I have the total control over the process of creating things. Okay, now that we talk about the research process, that we talk about the idea, I would like to jump into Maya and start talking about one of the most important techniques that we're going to use, which is called smooth mesh preview. It's time to show you my personal workflow, how I usually use this tool, and also I'm going to talk about the other tools I usually use to do my modeling process. And you will see that eventually I can use other tools, but with just those, you know, tools, very, very basic tools, just 4 or 5, I can create pretty much whatever I want. So I don't have to use a lot of different tools. You will see that as a modeler, I don't even need to use a lot of tools. We usually use the same tools over and over and over, okay? And let's go to Maya, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Okay, here we are inside Maya, and to explain this concept, I would like to use a very simple cube, go close to this guy, and add some subdivisions to this object. I would like to start with like that, just one subdivision, and this is cube 01. Okay, so this guy here, by the way, let me activate this option, wireframe unshaded, and I'm going to hide my grid by now. So to explain this concept, I would like to talk about something very, very important, which is we have two options to smooth our mesh. The first one is hitting 3 on your keyboard, and when you do that, the mesh is going to be smoothed, okay? But this is just a preview of the final smoothing result that you are going to have if you decide to really smooth this guy applying a modifier. But this is, again, it's just a preview. If you hit 1, you can go back to the polygon. If you hit 2, you can see the both results. You will see the polygon cage, we call this thing polygon cage, and you will see, which by the way correspond to the original polygons, and you will see the smooth mesh preview, okay? And when we hit 1 or 3, actually we are activating and we are switching between both modes. Let me show you here on the attribute editor. If you go to the smooth mesh inside the cube shape on your attribute editor, when you try to hit this guy here, you'll see that this guy is actually showing the smooth mesh. If you hit 2, you are switching to the cage. If you hit 1, you are disabling this option, okay? And that's why this thing is so powerful, because I don't have to apply a modifier, so I can go back and forth. I can do my modeling process. I can add information to this guy. I can do a lot of things. And then I can always go back, you know, to see the result. If I need to insert more edges, if I need to insert more polygonal information, and I can go back to the polygon view. This is a very interesting way to work. The other way to work is going to mesh and applying the smooth option. If you do that, you are applying literally a modifier. So if you do that, this is what is going to happen. So this is 1 division, and this is 2 divisions. Can you see this is very similar to the smooth mesh preview, but this is something that you cannot go back. The only way to go back from this point here is go into your channel box, go into the inputs. Every time we do anything on our objects and we want to change whatever, we can go to the inputs, and sometimes we have access to, sometimes, no, always we have access to the modifiers, okay? But that's the thing. If you try to change things here, like the divisions, for example, you can go back to 1, or you can go even further if you want. Like, let's try 4. Can you see the amount of polygons? It's a lot. Okay, it's just a very simple object. You don't even need this amount of polygons, this amount of smoothness. So just so you know, the only way to go back is trying to change here the settings. So the problem is, if you delete the history, you are going to lose this possibility to change this thing in the future. So that's what I'm going to do when I hit this button here. So now I cannot go back. So we are kind of stuck with this amount of polygons forever. Okay, so you have to pay attention to that. So let's go back a little bit, because I would like to demonstrate how this thing works. So this is the original mesh, right? We just have to duplicate this guy, so cube 2. And on cube 1, I'm going to, let's delete the history on both, just to be safe, right? on this guy, the cube 1, I'm going to apply the mesh smooth with 2 subdivisions, okay? And on this guy here, I'm going to just hit 3. And as you can see, we have less polygons. And we have, let's hide this thing, we have a similar result. It's pretty close, okay? And at the end, let's suppose that you really need the polygons, because you know, for some specific applications you really need the polygons. You cannot work with the smooth mesh preview, because as I said, this is your object and this is your final object. By the way, if you select this guy and hit 3, Maya is going to try to subdivide this guy even more, okay? And if you want to transform this smooth mesh preview into something like this, with like real polygons, you know, the way to do that is selecting your object and going to modify, convert, smooth mesh preview to polygons. That is no options, okay? You just have to click here, and as you can see here, you have the final result. And you can even try to go here. It's like if you are applying a modifier. As you can see, you have the modifier here, and as you can see, you have the modifier here. What Maya did was exactly that. He took the polygons, the smooth mesh preview, like the original polygons, you know, the very blocky thing, and he applied a poly smooth, which, by the way, is the same guy we apply on the same cube, on the first cube. So it's just a modifier, okay? So what I usually do is I work with my modeling, okay? And eventually, towards the end of the modeling, if I really need the final polygons, I can go there and I can convert the smooth mesh preview, which is this guy here. As you can see, I can go back and forth, hitting 1 and 3. I can take this guy here and I can go to modify, convert, smooth mesh preview to polygons. So, and this is my workflow, okay? So I never start applying the modifier since the beginning, never, ever. What I usually do is I model always using, model using the smooth mesh preview technique, and then eventually, and when I really need to work with polygons, when I really need the final polygons like this, I can go there and I can use the modify, convert, smooth mesh preview to polygons, okay? So this is something very important to keep in mind. I ask you to try to avoid the mesh smooth as much as you can, but let's suppose that you really want to use this guy. You have to understand some very important things. If you work on your polygons, for example, and if you subdivide, looks like that nothing happens, but it happens. So let's go back here to display, heads up display, and let's activate this poly count, okay? You can have several objects on your scene. Let's rename this guy to, this is going to be my cube 1. And now I'm going to have my cube 2 here. Okay, now I have like 2 cubes on my scene. This guy here I just duplicated to show you something very interesting. The first column show you the amount of components you have on your scene. He's taking all the objects and he's like adding those objects here. And right now we have 52 vertices, for example, all the objects, counting all the objects, okay? But this guy here, the second column, just counts the amount of components I have on that specific object. So 26 vertices, 48 edges, 24 faces, and so on, okay? And if I go even deeper, so for example, if I go to edges, and if I select 2 edges, the last column is the amount of components I selected on this object. So once again, first column, all the components on your scene. second columns, all the components on your selected objects. Third column, the amount of components I selected on a specific object. And why am I showing you that? Because when you add, for example, a mesh smooth, this is what happened. I literally multiply the amount of polygons I have on my scene. Okay, so when, by the way, this is two subdivisions. Okay, and when I, as you can see, I have like 386 vertices. It's exactly the same original object. Okay, so in this case, if I select this guy and hit 3, you will see that it's exactly the same number. So the smooth mesh preview corresponds to applying a modifier like mesh smooth to a object with two subdivisions, but the difference is if I delete the history on this guy, I cannot go back here and change things. So for example, I'm going to delete the history and now I am locked on this resolution. If I take this guy here and delete the history, nothing happens because I didn't apply anything. I can go back and forth as much as I want. So this is a very powerful technique and I use this all the time. One last thing I would like to show you is to work with this kind of thing, with this kind of object, we usually work adding information, adding loops and extruding things. And the way I usually do that is, for example, if you go to edges, shift right mouse button, you can access the tools that you can use on edges. In this case, I'm going to use insert edge loop. This is one of the tools I like the most. You just have to click and drag and put here. Okay, and I'm doing that to show you something important about the smooth process. Okay, so for example, now I have this edge here very close to the border of the other one. When I try to smooth this guy, you'll see that he tries to respect that edge, the transition between both objects, and I can create things like this, which is very cool. Okay, so pay attention to that. What we usually do, if you want even tighter transition here, you can have it. You just have to go back, hit 1 on your keyboard, go to the edge loop, and you can try to squeeze this edge very close to the other one. No, don't put on top of, or don't drag outside. Okay, you can have problems if you do that. Put very close, go back to the object mode, hit 3, and you see that you can have like an even tighter transition between those edges. Okay, if you want, you can do that with just a few edges. If you want, you can bevel the edges. For example, if you go here on edge, let's suppose that I want to do a bevel, very tiny bevel on the edges around this box. Let's go here and let's take here as well. You can apply a bevel here. I'm going very close because since I have a very tight transition, I don't want to do crazy things here. So very, very bevel with 2 segments, just 2 segments. I don't need to put more than that because try to remember that I'm going to subdivide this mesh, right? So if I'm going to subdivide, I don't need more than that. And now I have an even tighter transition because of the amount of information I put on this thing. So if I need to transform this thing into real polygons, I just have to go again, modify, convert, smooth mesh preview to polygons. Okay, I recommend you to try to avoid converting polygons. This is not the moment to do that. You can work for a long time without converting polygons, but you have the option. Okay. Try to remember that there is a lot of differences between those 2 workflows. There is a lot of differences using mesh smooth and just hitting 3. And by the way, if you take this guy here and hit 3, Maya is going to subdivide even more. If you want to see the final result of this guy, just go to modify, convert, use smooth mesh preview to polygons, and now you see the amount of polygons I have in just one object. It's really, really beautiful, really precise, but you have to ask yourself if you really need this amount of information, because there is a lot of edges here doing absolutely nothing. You know, you can have a better topology, I would say, without this amount of polygons. You have too much, probably, in this case. Okay, so this is probably one of the most important techniques that we are going to use in probably our projects from now on. I could spend hours talking about tools and how to use the tools, but first of all, I've been doing this during the classes, and as soon as I start the modeling process, I'm going to explain the tools that I'm using and the way I'm using them and why I'm using them. So instead of that, I would like to spend a few minutes explaining something extremely important for the modeling process, which is symmetry. Okay? If you go to, for example, a cylinder, if you create a cylinder, you notice something very interesting. You have the black lines here. The black lines, they mean like the axis, and they cross at the center, 0, 0, 0. When you create a cylinder, if you go to the top view, you'll notice that very clearly. Maya tries to work with like an even number of sides to put intentionally this edge across the object on all axes. Okay, so this edges, they are crossing this object because eventually we will have the need of modeling things, just half of the object, change things, do whatever we want, and then we are going to take this guy and mirror to the other side. Okay, so pay attention to that. There is actually two very, very important informations here. The first one is choose one axis. I really don't care which one. What I mean by that is you can consider, for example, the front of the objects to pointing to z-axis or pointing to x-axis, and the top of the objects are always going to be y. I really hope that you respect that. Okay. After you decide the axis you want to work, try to work like this. All the points of the object should be on one side, and we should have the same amount of points on the other side, right? And the points that cross this object in this axis you chose, they should be perfectly aligned in the middle. So I'm going to show you two different ways to do that. Okay, how to put those points in the middle. So let's suppose that the points here, they are completely crazy. I'm going to move those points like intentionally just to show you the problem. The problem is they are absolutely not well aligned, so I'm moving everything. Okay, and the way to fix this problem is literally using a very cool thing that you already know how to do, which is snap to grids. Okay, I have to take all those points and I have to align those points with this grid line here, and this grid line means 0. Okay, but 0 in which axis? You just have to look to your object and you have to discover which axis is crossing this thing, and you have to tell Maya I have to take all those points and I have to align to this axis. That's it. You can do that on a visual way if you're a more visual person, or you can do that moving the things automatically. I'm going to show you both ways. Okay, so first of all, let's do this on a very visual way. The way to do that is if you go to the top view, hit 4 on your keyboard to see the wireframe, and now you can see that you have to take those points here and you have to align with this axis here, right? The way to do that is taking the points. In this case, you can do that one by one if you don't feel comfortable doing a lot of things at the same time, but you can do the same operation with a lot of points at the same time. If you want to do one by one, just snap to the grid. And by the way, I already told you that if you want to snap to the grid, you just have to hold X and drag to be able to snap things. So hold X first. That's why you're seeing a bunch of X's here. Hold X and then start dragging. Okay. Or if you don't like to do that, you just have to click here to activate. But remember, you have to go back there and deactivate. Okay. And then every time you move, the points are going to snap at the center. Okay. So you can do that with all the points. If you feel comfortable, you can do that with all the points and everything will be fine. Okay. Another way to do that, like some people like this way, so let's disable this guy. You can, let's go back to the messy configuration, right? You can select all those points. I'm selecting all the points I have to put at the center, right? This one here, I'm using shift and clicking, okay? I select all the points, and the first thing I should do is I have to squeeze all the points and make them flat, okay? To do that, I'm going to use my scale tool, and I'm going to click and drag to squeeze all the points. As you can see, everything now is flat. You can still try to squeeze, but of course, this is the limit, okay? Now you can take the move tool, you can activate the snap to grids, and you can click and drag, and then suddenly everything is there. Okay, so this is a two-step operation. First you flat the points, and then you move the points and put them at the center. Okay, the second way to do that is, let's go back to the messy point like this. The second way to do that is you have to select all the points. Same thing, I have to select all the points I want to do this operation. And if you go to the top of your viewport, you are going to see a very interesting tool. And if you're not seeing this tool here, just keep in mind that it could be, you know, hidden like this. Okay, if this thing is hidden, you just have to click here to show this tool. Okay, and this guy here is called absolute transform. You just have to click here and you'll see absolute transform, relative transform, rename, and select by name. We are going to use some of those options eventually. This is the most important one for now. Okay, absolute transform means that you can put values here and you can apply transformations on those guys. What I mean by that is, if you think about moving all those points at once, you can say to Maya, take all of those points and align all of them on this axis here, which by the way is the x-axis, in 0. Make sense? So this is the axis I want to point, and this is the direction I'm working on. So x, 0, enter. When you do that, I automatically align all the points to exactly this point in just one axis. And by the way, I could use edges as well. It's exactly the same thing. If you want to move all the edges of the object at once, so yeah, I selected all the edges. I was just seeing if I really selected all of the guys. If I put 1 here, Maya is going to take all those vertices and going to move on this direction, 1 unity, like 1 unity, and then they are perfectly aligned here. Okay, if I want to go back with all the edges to this point, I have to go here and put -1, and then Maya is going to return the points, but be careful with that. This kind of thing can happen. Okay, -1. Why this thing didn't work? Because right now is the way the tool works. So in this case, he's working as absolute transform. Okay, absolute transform looks to the center of the word, and -1 is this point, not this point. Okay, so let's undo this thing, and if you want to change this thing to relative transform is relative to the point you are right now. Okay, if you use relative transform and put -1, what Maya is going to do is take all those guys here, all those selected edges, and Maya is going to move -1 and is going to align here, exactly what we want, right? -1, and then everything is fine. Okay, so just be careful, because this is not a Maya thing, by the way. This is a 3D, very, very basic concept. We are working with 3D coordinates. We are working with 3 axes, and we are working with Y going up, positive, going down, negative. We are working with X going right, positive, going left, negative. And we are working with Z going this direction, Z positive going on the other direction, Z negative. And everything that I'm telling you, consider the pivot point at 0, 0, 0 of the word. So keep that in mind, okay? Now I would like to briefly talk about mirroring this object to the other side, okay? But keep in mind that all the points that you want to mirror, they should be at the center of the word to avoid problems when you take this guy and mirror to the other side, okay? So if you want to mirror this guy to the other side, we have 2 options, okay? The first one is very, very simple, very basic. I tend to use this from time to time, but I don't like very much, which is selecting the object, duplicating the object, okay? And if you go to the scale tool, you can scale this object against his opposite axis, like this. If I squeeze, and go to the other side, and look at your channel box, you see that if I put -1 here, I will have a perfect copy of this object mirrored to the other side. Make sense? I usually do this kind of thing when I want 2 separate objects. Okay? Okay, but in which situation I would like to have like 2 different objects? Here in this very small scenario, this doesn't make any sense, but sometimes when you are modeling, for example, a character, and you have a shoe, and this shoe is kind of far from the other shoe. I'm modeling everything centralized, and if I want to, so let's suppose that this small box here is the shoe of the character, okay? And I want to mirror this guy to the other side, okay? In this case, I can do the same thing. I can mirror this guy to the other side, but pay attention to the pivot point of the center, okay? In this case here, it worked because the pivot point is already at the center. And this guy here, by the way, you have transformations here. You have to freeze the transformations to let everything be like 1, 1, 1. If you have -1 here, that means that this object is flipped. You can have problems in the future, okay? So keep that in mind. I'm going to hide this thing here to try to explain this a little bit better. If you take a look to this object, let's suppose that this is one of the shoes of the character, and I want another shoe on the other side. We have 2 ways to fix this problem. First of all, you can take the object, okay, and you can go to the edit pivot point. You can snap this pivot point to the center of the word, like so, and finish the pivot point editing mode. And now everything we do with this cube is going to be reflected to the other side in the sense of trying to respect the pivot point. So if I duplicate this cube, Control D, and scale this thing to the other side, like -1, you will see that we have like a perfect copy, okay? Another way to do that is, let's go back here. So let's suppose that you have the pivot point here, and you don't want to change the pivot point of your object. You don't want to change the pivot point to put in the center, because sometimes this shoe, for example, you have the shoe, the shoelaces, and you have a bunch of other objects, separate meshes. And doing that it's a lot of work, right? So if you have to duplicate like a lot of objects, let's suppose that you have, let's put a kind of crazy object here together. Let's suppose that this is a bunch of objects and they are absolutely separated, okay? and you have a bunch of objects. You are not going to change every single pivot point and put it at the center and then duplicate. Doesn't make any sense. So in this case, my suggestion is select everything, Control G to group. And I already told you that when you create groups, the pivot point of the group is always at the center of the word, which is awesome, very convenient, right? You just have to select the group, Control D to duplicate this guy, and then look to the axis, in this case, minus X, right? You just have to scale this guy -1 to the other side. So simple as that. So -1, and then we have like the perfect copy. Okay, just remember that if you do that, since we have this concept of local and global, inside the group you have all the objects, and the objects can have their own transformations inside the group. As you can see, for example, the cube here already have some transformation, this guy have some transformation, so everything can kind of exist inside the group, no problem whatsoever, but the group itself can have transformations. And this is a transformation. So the -1 here that we use to mirror this guy to the other side, this is a transformation. The first thing we need to do is freeze the transformations. Okay, go back to 1, 1, 1, because when you have this -1 here and you try to keep insisting and going ahead and modeling things, you can have problems in the future. We are going to talk about that in the future, not now, but keep in mind that this is probably the best way to mirror things. If you don't want to use the groups, you just have to select the groups, go to Edit, Ungroup, and now you have all the objects perfectly symmetrized. Okay? Another way to deal with symmetry is using a command called mirror. If you go to Mesh, you will see here we have mirror. Okay? Let's bring back our cylinders, because this is a very important concept. I usually use mirror. Again, I usually use the duplicate and change the scale to -1 when I want two separate objects, two separate meshes, two separate groups. Okay, I usually use this group, and you are going to see me doing this technique over and over and over. Okay, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I have a lot of other things that I usually do with my objects, but this is the most basic ones. Okay, so first of all, if I want to mirror this guy to the other side and at the same time create just one mesh and kind of fuse everything, the best way to do that is using the mirror, which by the way is also here, and it's also on your menu. Shift right mouse button and you see here your mirror command. Okay, when you apply this command, you're always going to see this small window here. And first of all, don't get scary. Don't get scared. This is perfectly normal. The commands have some default values, and you have to provide some information to this guy. So first of all, as you can see here, this blue arrow is telling you to which side this command is flipping objects. I want to take this object and I want to flip to this side, right? If I want to do that, the best way to do that is trying to understand which axis is this one, because I want this arrow here pointing to the opposite side of this object, literally to the opposite side, which is this axis, which by the way is X. So we have to go there and axis X. Another very important information is, on this case, I'm taking half of the object, which by the way was on the negative side of X. Pay attention to that. Okay, the position of the letters here, they reveal which is positive, which is negative. So for example, the x-axis here is positive when it's pointing to the direction of the letters. So always look to this guy and you will understand what I mean. So when I'm talking, why I'm talking about that, because of this thing called direction. Okay, it could be negative or could be positive. Okay, this is the most important thing. And the third important thing that you have to define is the border. Do you want to merge the border, or do you don't want to merge the borders? Doesn't matter. You are going to still have two objects. Okay, inside the same mesh. But if you want to just mirror the meshes without fusing the components, you can select do not merge. But my advice to you is, if you're working on a symmetrized object and this object is at the center of the world and you want just one object, okay, try to always use merge border. Okay, this is extremely important. And this value here, merge threshold, means every single vertex that is far from, far from each other by this value is not going to be fused. So that's why this value is so low. But in this case, since all the vertices are kind of on top of each other, they're going to become just one vertex, and I will have like one object at the end. You just have to click outside and you are going to finish this command. Okay, and this is probably one of the most powerful and important techniques that I have to show you, because of course there is a lot of tools. If you go here, by the way, to the modeling toolkit, you will see that when I talk about symmetry, and I talk about symmetry a lot, I never touched those tools here. Eventually we are going to use those tools, but symmetry, by the way, this and this are exactly the same thing. We are going to use those tools when we have to literally work with symmetry, which is not the case right now. So in the future, we are going to have specific projects dealing with this type of thing. So don't worry about that right now. I am not worried about working with symmetry. That's why my symmetry is always turned off. Okay, and I think I'm going to stop here and I'm going to start the process of modeling, because we have a lot of things to do. And instead of showing every single tool, I was just worried about this very important concept of symmetry, because we are going to use this over and over and over. So to start this process, I would like to create a new project and show you very briefly how I usually deal with this type of thing. So first of all, File, Project Window, and here, as you can see, I can define the place where I should save my project, and I just have to click New and give a name to this guy. So in this case, I am creating Lighthouse, and I'm going to use like underscore Lighthouse Island, because I would like to create a island and a lighthouse. So as we discussed, I'm going to use all the default folders. I don't have to change anything else here. And the only thing is, if you want to use, as I said before, Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever, to put your folders and have access to this folder using another computer, you can do so. You just have to click here and search for the main folder, and inside this folder you choose. Maya is going to create this folder, and inside this folder Maya is going to create the other folders where he is going to try to organize the files and where you should put all the things you need for this project. Okay, so very basic, very simple, and you don't have to do anything else other than that. And as soon as you create the project, you just have to click accept, and looks like Maya is doing absolutely nothing. But if you try to save this file, so for example, go to File, Save Scene, and as you can see here, you are actually working on this project right now. And if you try to save files, Maya is going to put you straight inside the scenes folder, inside the project folder where you decided to save this thing. Okay, so just think about that. Every time we start a new project, we have to do that just the first time. And after that, you just have to tell Maya, okay, I would like to work on that specific project. You have to go to File, Set Project. Okay, and you don't even have to go inside the folder. You just have to select the folder and then hit set, and that's it. So from this point, and forward. Maya is going to look to this folder every time you have to use textures, every time you try to save a file, and so on. Okay? Now that we have a project, I would like to talk about something very, very important, and I do this all the time, and it's about scene organization. Okay, so let's suppose that you finish your object and you have to construct this object. You know, you have a bunch of other objects and they are kind of, you know, part of this object. So let's suppose that this object is a boat. I don't know. And to do this boat, you used a bunch of different objects. Okay. First of all, I would like to give you a personal advice, and you don't have to do that, but I would be very happy if you do so. So, for example, try to consider the plane, the grid here, as your ground. So to do that, I create a small plane. I make this guy bigger, and as you can see, all the objects, they are crossing the ground, right? So the first thing we have to do is to first change the pivot point of all the objects and move those objects to, you know, to the top of the ground, like so. You can do that by hand. You can do this with precision. To do this with precision, the only thing you have to do is to go inside the pivot point mode. You just have to hit D. Select one object. You can click and drag to select, like, you know, click and drag to select a face or a component to try to align this guy, or just click and one single component, which could be a face, could be a vertex, could be whatever. And then you have to activate the snap to grid, which is this option here. Okay, and then click and drag this guy until he snaps on top of the floor. Okay, so in this case, since the objects are in front, I'm going to hide. As you can see, the plane is not crossing in any possible way the ground. It's perfectly on top of the ground. Okay, and this is what I want, and you have to do that with all the objects. Okay, another very, very important thing: delete the history and freeze the transformations. Okay. This is mandatory. The pivot thing you don't have to do, but I would like you to always work thinking that the plane is the ground. Doesn't matter what you are modeling. So if you are modeling a boat, half of this boat is going to be probably inside like the ocean or the water or the river, whatever. In this case, you have to consider the plane, this grid here, as your ground, as a way to maintain consistency when you work with modeling. Okay, so this is something extremely important. So I'm hiding this guy. Just hit H and you can hide objects. I'm bringing another one. You just have to hit D, click here, click D again to go outside this thing. If you want to activate the pivot point, just when you move things, hit V first, hold V, and then click and drag. That's why you are seeing a bunch of V's here, because I am holding V before dragging to activate the snap to points or snap to grids. Snap to grids, by the way, is X. You just have to hold X and you can click and drag to snap this guy to a grid point. Okay. And everything should be on top of the plane. Let's do the same thing with torus. So let's hide the cube. Let's bring back the torus. Okay. And in this case, I don't have like a polygon here, but I have a bunch of points. As you can see, a bunch of points. And I can use those points to align my pivot point, right? And it's super easy to do that. You just have to let's see, go to a side view. You can do this on the perspective, but looking from the side, I think is easier. Go to the side view, okay? And hit 4 to see the wireframe. And I want to take the pivot point, move this guy, and I want to align with the points here on the base, right? You just have to hit V, hold V, drag this guy into the bottom, and then hit D to finish this pivot point mode, and now everything is fine. And if you want to put this guy on top of the plane, you just have to click and drag. With before you drag, of course, you have to hit X and then drag. Okay. If you want, you can hit X, drag, and release X, and the snap to points, they are still active. Okay. You don't have to hold X forever or V forever. Okay. Just so you know. Okay. This is one thing. So first of all, consider the ground as the grid as your ground plane. Okay, I will do that, the remodeling, just so you know. The second thing is delete history, and the third thing is freeze transformation. So delete history, freeze transformation. By the way, those things here are just shortcuts to edit, delete by type history, and modify freeze transformations. If you do that, everything is clean. All the objects, they are perfectly clean. All the pivot points are at the base of the object, so get used to this concept. You have to do this all the time, and this is even more important if you think about games, for example. I already explained this concept a few weeks ago. And the last thing you have to do is you have to rename all the objects. And if those objects, they belong to a object, you have to rename every single part. And you have to put those guys inside a group, because I believe you want to keep the pieces separated. We don't usually combine everything inside the same mesh. This is not common. And I would like to avoid this kind of thing as much as I can, because sometimes it's easier to texturize and to apply textures and to configure certain things if we have separate entities, if we have separate meshes, okay? But to keep consistency and to have everything organized and to have the final object that I can bring to my scene and I can move and I can do a lot of things, I usually rename all the objects, and you can do that. Just double click and rename the object the way you want. So sometimes, most of the times, I put the name of the object, underline 001. Why am I using like 3 numbers here? First, because sometimes I end up having like hundreds of objects, and this is super normal, believe me. If you want, you can work with like 2 numbers. Don't work with just one, because sometimes when Maya rename things, it goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 9, 10, 2 numbers. Okay, so I usually put like 3 numbers here just to avoid duplicity. Maya hates duplicity. Okay, and by the way, you cannot use numbers on the beginning of the names. Maya will not allow you to do that. Okay, so if you want, you can work like that. I like to work like that. Or let me show you another way. Instead of do this one by one, which by the way, it's a lot of work. Okay, we just have to select the object, select the first, select the last one, and here on the top, you will see that on the same place where we saw the absolute transform, you just have to click on this icon here. We have absolute transform, relative transform. I explain how those 2 guys work. And you also have rename. Okay, click on rename and you will see that this thing changes completely. So this is a way to rename all your objects following a pattern. So you just have to give the pattern here, and Maya is going to use this pattern to rename all the objects. And in this case, I just have to put boat piece 001. And Maya is going to take this pattern here, and he's going to start to look into the object, and he's going to change things like 001, 002, 003, and so on. When you hit enter, you will see that Maya renames all the things for you. And the last, I promise, this is the last thing you have to do is to put everything inside a group. When you do that, Maya creates a group. The pivot point of the group is always at the center of the word, and you just have to rename the top node as boat, like this. And inside this guy, we have a bunch of things. So I know that this group is the main object, and inside the group I have like different parts that composes this main object. So this is extremely important to keep the organization. Okay, so think about that and try to reproduce that on your works, and I will do that all the time. One last thing, and this is the last one, I promise. After you finish modeling objects, sometimes people don't understand that on professional productions we usually have a lot of people working together, and they work on the modeling. So when people are modeling things for the environment, other people are working on the characters and so on. It's impossible to work inside the same file, right? Doesn't make any sense. So in this case, since I'm working on a very small project and I have to teach you things about modeling, I'm going to model all my objects here inside the same file. But eventually I'm going to talk about this scene organization on a very professional perspective. I'm going to separate every single object that composes my scene, and I'm going to tell you the right way to work on bigger projects, okay? But this is not the moment to worry about this, okay? Just keep in mind that we briefly talked about scene organization. You have to keep the organization on a very obsessive way, because it's super easy to get messy very fast. And in this case, working with groups, pivots, deleting history, freezing transformation, renaming objects using the rename tool. This is super basic, but we can go even further doing very professional things when it comes to organization. And in this project, I will start explaining this concept, but not now. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. The last thing is, every time I model an object, the object is going to be at the center. We already talked about this. And when I finish, I'm going to save the file. Of course, I'm going to go to this object, to the group, and I'm going to hide. And I'm going to start the next object. At the end, we will have, let me bring this guy again. We will have a bunch of objects, okay? And they are going to be hidden, of course. I don't have to see the objects here, but I will have like every single object with multiple parts inside groups. And I can work with those groups just to organize my scene, which I will do probably on the second video, okay? That's it. Before we start modeling the assets, I would like to talk briefly about some very important things that I am going to apply. The first one is I'm going to consider my grid as the ground. So you can think about the grid as the level of the ocean, if you will. So in this case, everything I do, I will consider to put my objects and to model my things above the grid, and I'm going to consider the grid as my level of the ocean. Okay, so saying that, I would like to briefly discuss the options that we have to create this landscape. So in this case, I could start with a polygon plane, and I can use some faces here to pull this thing up, and that will work fine. Okay, there is not anything wrong about this approach, but I could also, if I want, use a polygon disk. If you think about the polygon disk, you will see that we have a bunch of square faces, but the topology is a little bit different. And since we have this different topology, this might be very interesting for us, and we can use this for our advantage. So that's why I'm going to use a polygon disk instead of using a polygon plane. Okay, sometimes we have to think about this kind of thing, but the difference is more about the topology than about the fact that both have like square faces. You know, it's pretty much the same thing. So I'm going to make this guy bigger. Again, I don't care about the scale of anything. I really don't care about that, because I will adjust the proportions of the objects. I don't care about scale because I'm not using real scale. Okay, in the future, I'm going to talk about scale. I never talked about scale with you, and we will talk because scale is super important when we do things aiming to get more realistic results. Talking about lighting, for example. But since this is a very stylized scene with a lot of stylized objects, I really don't care about scale. Okay, so don't worry about that. I care about the proportions. Okay, so I'm going to make this guy bigger. I'm going to increase the divisions. Instead of 3, I'm going to use 5. Oh, maybe 5 would be way too much. Okay, we can think about 4. Always try to use less resolution. Okay, and then if you need more resolution, you can add more resolution in the future. Okay, I need to select a bunch of polygons here and start thinking about modeling this elevation. I'm thinking about a place like a small a cliff. On top of this cliff, I'm going to put my lighthouse and the house and a little bit of tree. So it's an island. So at the end, I will have an island. So that's why I'm thinking about those things. So I'm going to use the polygons here on this side. Let's go to polygon face. You can select individual faces if you want. You can also use, if you want, this tool here, which is paint selection tools. To increase the size, you just have to hold B, click and drag. If you hold B, click and drag with your left mouse button, you can make it bigger or smaller, and you can paint the selection. So I'm going to select a bunch of polygons here. I'm going to take this curve here as well. And this might be the part of my cliff, and I'm going to lower this part towards the beach. Okay, if you want, we can elevate everything and work in different layers, I would say. So for example, we can select a little bit more around, and we can select all of those parts here as well. Not that I am going to use everything at once, but just to have like this selection. Okay, if you want to make things even more balanced, you can, but I think this is cool for my main idea. I'm going to take this selection here, and again, this is not exactly centralized. If you want to make it centralized, you can select even more here, something like this, and you will see that now, since I have the same selection to all the sides, I can take those guys here and I can extrude up. To do that, Shift right mouse button to access the options to apply the operations on this faces. Remember, I am on face mode. That's why I selected just the faces. Okay, Shift right mouse button, go to extrude faces, and we are going to push this guy a little bit up, something like this. Okay, and I'm going to resize, like rescale from the center just a little bit. Okay, and now I'm going to deselect part of this. You can go to the selection tool, and if you hold Control, you can deselect things using this tool. Okay, so I'm going to deselect this. I'm going to deselect one row there, one row there, around this thing. This one I will keep selected. Okay, so let's do this one more time. So Shift right mouse button, go to extrude faces, and put this guy up. This time I'm going to do this like way more. Okay, something like this. You don't need to exaggerate. Okay, if you want a little bit of divisions here, is not a bad idea. So we can go here and we can put like 2 or 3 divisions. Be careful. I am being very careful to not add a lot of divisions on this beginning. Okay, so first of all, let's go back and let's deselect again. So let's go to the tool, let's hold Control, let's click and drag, and doing that we can deselect this part. And here I don't need to do a lot of effort, to be very honest. I just want to create like this effect here. I want to push this thing down, and I want to move this down, but be careful, we are kind of squeezing things together here, so we need to select a few more faces. Again, select the two, select everybody together, and something like this, and pull down a little bit. I think you understand where I am heading for on this thing. Let me deselect this part here. You can also deselect using Control, hold Shift, double click. Oh, sorry. This happens from time to time. If you hold Control, you can deselect. If you hold just Control and double click on the same row but ahead, you are going to deselect. So I'm using Control and trying to deselect. It's the same thing of using Shift, but of course it's the opposite effect. We're going to deselect instead of selecting things. And here, since I'm creating this thing, I will stop. Okay. And now I would like to introduce you to a very cool tool, which is a tool for literally sculpting things inside Maya. So it's the same thing that we have in ZBrush, for example. We have to be aware that sometimes the edges here, they have like a huge difference, you know, in size. We have to be careful with that. So I would like to fix this thing a little bit, just selecting the vertices, pulling up, like so, to have a little bit of balance between the faces, because I don't want a huge differences between those faces, okay? Things to keep in mind. So first of all, I would like to keep this part here flat, okay? So I don't want to lose a lot of this flatness on this part. If for some reason that happens, I will manage to go there, select the vertices and flat again, okay? Just in case. But I don't have to worry too much about this thing right now. So first of all, let's go to the object mode. As you can see, I already have a lot of things here, like transformations. I have history. I have to rename this object as well. So this is going to be my island. And I can start deleting the history, freezing the transformations, and then right away you can jump to the sculpt tools. If your object is selected, you can, if you click on any of those tools here, your object is going to change just a little bit, okay, to reflect the difference of the modes that you are right now. So for example, if I go to this tool here, sculpt tool, you will see right away the object changes a little bit, and you are inside the sculpting, and you are sculpting on island. Okay, island is this guy, the island shape, the polygonal shape of this object, which by the way is the one we have on the screen right now. Things to consider when you use all those tools, okay? They are very, very sensitive to the scale of the object. So those tools, they're meant to be used in real scale objects, and this object is not by any means real scale. Okay, it's not using real scale. So what I'm supposed to do is, don't worry about that. You can still using the tools, okay? You just have to be aware of that. So for example, I'm going to use the relax tool. I'm going to use the smooth tool, okay? I might use the sculpt tool, but all of those tools, if you double click on the icon, you're going to open up the tool settings for that tool specifically. So you have size. If you reset the tool here, if you have size and you have string, okay? This means absolutely nothing for you, but this string, if you use on a very small scale object, you will see that this is way too much. So for example, if you click and drag now, you will see that you are creating a huge deformation on the object. I don't want that much of deformation. It's super cool, I like, it's beautiful, but this is not what I meant. So you have to be careful, because if you try to do that, I just hit Z to undo this thing. If you try to do that, you are going to change the shape way too fast. Okay, so my advice for you is try to use a lower number here. If you want to change the size of this tool, by the way, every single tool inside Maya that shows you like a brush or whatever, allows you to change the size of the brush just hitting and holding, of course, B on your keyboard, clicking and drag. As you can see, I am changing the size of the thing. If you hit B, hold B on your keyboard, click and drag with the left mouse button, you can change the size of this thing. So the most important thing is I would like to smooth a little bit the sides. Okay, I definitely don't have a lot of polygons, so I have to be aware that changing this thing is going to be really difficult because I'm working with very low resolution a mesh, and the changes, they might not be that good. But again, I don't want that low poly look because I really don't like that. I think that is a horrible type of simplification. I like to avoid that on my works as much as I can. So you can do that if you want, of course, but I don't like. So I'm going to, you can use the sculpt tool. Basically the sculpt tool, let me make this thing a little bit smaller. Yeah, something like this. So you can lift, or if you hold Control, you can pull this thing to the inside. Okay, if you hold Shift, instead of pulling or doing whatever, you are going to activate this tool here. This is the smooth tool. By the way, if you click on the smooth tool, you see the strength is huge. It's huge. So my advice to you is to use a lower value, something between 5 and 10 if you're using very small scale objects. This tool here, same thing, something between 5 and 10. This other tool here is the relax tool. Relax is a little bit different than the smooth tool because the relax is going to try to relax the position of the vertices without changing the shape of the object. Okay, those three tools, they are probably the most fun tools to use to model organic shapes and this kind of thing inside Maya. Okay, be careful because if you have a lot of polygons, you will have a hard time trying to use those tools. Okay, so just keep in mind that the strength of those tools, if you have the tool settings open, you can just change the tool and you will see the settings right away. So I'm going to use like 10 on this one, 10 on the relax tool, 5 on the smooth tool, and maybe 5, maybe 2.5 on the sculpt tool. So I think this is more than enough. Okay, I did some changes here. I'm going to undo until I go back to the original position of the vertices. Yes, something like this. Okay, now I can start playing with this. So if you hold Shift, you can make this thing a little bit smoother. And what I want is I want to make this island, make this curve here and go down around here and merge with the beach. Okay, to do that, you can again smooth, and you can also jump to this tool here, to the relax tool, and you'll see that the relax tool tries to keep the shape and tries to change the position of the vertices to accommodate this change. So always keep an eye on this thing. So again, if you use the sculpt tool and just click, you will push the vertices on the direction of the normals. I don't want that. I want the opposite. If you hold Control, you can push the vertices to the inside. Okay, so this is a very cool way to move, as I said, model organic objects. Okay, so as you can see here, I am managing to do that. And by the way, I'm using my mouse. Okay, I am not using my tablet. So if you want to use your tablet, be my guest, but you don't have to. Okay, be careful with the deformation. So hold Shift to activate the smooth tool while you are using the sculpt tool. Okay, try to smooth as best as you can. Again, don't worry too much because this is not going to be that low resolution forever. We are going to change some things, but on the beginning, as I said, I always work with less polygons. Okay, I'm going to use this tool a little bit on the sides as well, because this is like super important for breaking this impression that I have a very, very low resolution object. But I don't want to affect too much this top part. I don't want to affect the flatness of the thing, you know, the flatness of this cliff. Sorry. And here, since this is like the beach, I would like to also take the advantage of using the smooth tool. Again, if you want to make the things bigger, you can hold B, you can change, and you will affect more things. So I'm going to make this very, very, very smooth, because I would like to have a good transition between beach and the ocean. I will have a little bit of ocean, of course, as you can see. So sometimes you see like a pop-up of Windows trying to change the layout of my keyboard. I will fix that eventually. This is very annoying. So that's good for now. Let me see if I can go further here. So I kind of like this shape. It's super cool. So again, I'm going to push those guys a little bit down, sorry. A little bit down, little bit down, little bit down, and then with the shift, I can click and drag and make the transition better and better. And as you can see, we have this type of thing. So to access the top of the cliff, you can go from the beach and up and access the top part. So basically, this is what I want for this guy now. And the next thing is to work on this resolution. As you can see, everything is super low poly. By the way, when I go back to the selection tool or other tools, as you can see, I go outside of the sculpting tool. If you activate any sculpting tools with your object selected, the mesh changes a little bit and you are on the sculpting mode. Okay, so this is basically the way Maya handles with that. As you can see, we have these normal problems. Everything is so very well marked, because of course I have like straight angles and I don't have enough resolution. Okay, if this is something that bothers you too much, you can do a couple of things. So first of all, you can increase the resolution, of course, and we are going to do that eventually. The second thing you can do is you can go to mesh display and you can try to use soften edge. If you use soften edge, everything is going to be like way softer. And the shader itself is going to try to break this transition between the points, but we still have some very sharp angles here. Again, don't worry about that. And I would like to show you a very cool way to get cool deformations, and we are going to use the same technique with the ocean, okay, which is using a special deformer. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to save this scene. As you can see, it's pointing to my scenes folder inside my Lighthouse Island project, so that's why it's super important to work with projects. So I'm going to save this guy. I'm using my ASCII, so don't worry about the format right now. This is not important. Save as, and everything is fine. So, by the way, every time we use most of the commands here on top, we have inputs, we have history. So try to remember to always go there, delete the history, freeze the transformations only if you have really transformations here. Okay, so it's a good idea to reshape this object with a little bit of resolution. Okay, to do that, I would like to show you a tool that is new inside Maya. Is inside Maya since Maya 2020, and they put a lot of effort to bring this type of tool to kind of match Maya with other very powerful softwares like ZBrush. Okay, so we already have sculpting tools, and they thought about including a retopologize tool, which is, by the way, this guy here. Okay, select your object, click on the options. Don't jump straight to the tool, otherwise you will not understand what is going on, okay? So, description generates clean, new topology that preserves the shape of the source while converting the mesh into all four-sided faces, and I love this thing, okay? So just for that, I already love this tool, but you have to be aware that this tool is not a magic bullet, okay? I started working with four-sided faces. I reached the shape I want, kind of, but the faces are way too big, okay? I don't want to just subdivide. I want to subdivide keeping the four faces. So this tool can be used in two scenarios. If you want to take something that is extremely heavy, extremely high poly, and transform this object into a less heavy version, and this is one of the best applications for this tool. And this tool is going to rebuild the object with just four-sided faces. The other scenario is doing exactly what I have here, something very low poly, and I want to increase the polygons, keeping the shape, but having four-sided faces, okay? So you don't have to use that. I'm just using as an excuse to show you the tool, okay? If you want to keep the low poly version of the island, it's totally fine. Okay, I just want a little bit of polygons, and I'm going to use the tool. By the way, if you go to edit preset settings, I'm going to use this tool as you know, the default settings. I'm going to retopologize this tool using the default settings. As you can see, now we have almost the same thing, but it's not the same thing. We have a different topology. We have things coming from the top to the side. We kind of lost a little bit of information, but this is not a problem. The mesh is still fairly low resolution. And if you want even more resolution, if you go to the inputs, you still have the options here. You still have this option called target face count, and you can go here and you can add more points. But be careful, because doing that is going to increase the polygons on your object, and it takes a while to process. As you can see, it gives me like a few seconds, and then I have the results. Another thing to reconsider is depending on the settings. So for example, here we have like topology regularity 0.5, but the face uniformity is 0. Face uniformity is what guarantees that I will have like square or squarish polygons all over the place, okay? Right now I don't have. I have some polygons very stretched, very compressed, and I have also polygons with four-sided faces, but on a more squarish format. So if you go here, let me reduce. No, I'll keep the same number, okay? So if something happens, it's because of the amount of polygons. But let's take the face uniformity at 1, for example. He's going to recalculate, and he's going to give me this feedback. All the faces now are kind of distributed to occupy pretty much the same resolution, okay? So I don't want this amount of faces unless I want to go back to the sculpting tools and I want to model again, which by the way I can do. I can go to the sculpt tools, try to remember to delete the history just for you know, avoiding problems, and go back to the sculpting tools, and you can try to use the sculpt tool. You can use shift. You will see sometimes, since we change a little bit the settings of the tool, the response of the tool is not that adequate because of the amount of polygons we have now. So if you feel that you are clicking and nothing is happening, you have to go back there, and you have to probably increase the strength of the tool. For example, this I'm going to use 10 because again we have more polygons, right? So it makes sense. You can, I'm using shift and clicking to make this a little bit smoother. As you can see, we still have this effect going on, but on a very subtle way, okay? Be careful to not take completely the harshness of some parts. So for example, I want this feeling that I have like polygons here and everything is sharp, because this will be like rocks. Of course, we can create some rocks and we can put there. Yeah, just so you know, this is a very cool workflow, and we can use this to do pretty much any organic / environmental work. And I use that very, very often when I want to create like the basic shapes. And here is the final result. I think I like this thing. If you want more smoothness, you can. But the angle that we are going to use is going to be pretty much this angle here. Okay, so again, I don't want to take a lot. I want this look of having something harsh, something that reminds me like rocks and this kind of thing. And we are put the lighthouse here, a small place, a small house, a small forest maybe. We can draw like a path here, and we can create the beach, and we can create a lot of things. So if you want, for example, to push some things up, you can hold Control, and you can click, 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 just to try to create a small difference. So by the way, yeah, so sorry, this is wrong. Control is going to pull down. I'm just giving like small clicks with this thing. Be careful to not change too much near the base. Okay, I want to do that, and at the same time, when I add information, I can hold Shift and I can click to make it smoother. Okay, if you think that you need this kind of thing, okay, try to turn your camera as well, because it's a good practice. And after I have this result, I can try to think about the ocean. So one last thing is, if again you think that you have a lot of polygons already, you can go back to the tool and you can apply the retopology once again. So for example, I can go there and retopologize, go to the options. You can reset the settings if you think that you already have all the things you want. Okay, so for example, topology, regularity, I'm putting 1, face uniformity like 1. You can test different results. So you can use a different amount of things, and you can retopologize. So be aware that this process can be a little bit tricky and can consume a lot of time, because it depends on your computer, depends on your mesh. And now we have like a low resolution mesh. It's way too low now. You can undo and you can go back and you can try once again, mesh, retopologize. Let's put like 3000 maybe, something like 3000, 5000. 3000 would be probably way too low poly. Okay, remember that you can put the number here. If you want a copy of the original, you can select this thing, copy of the original. If you want to keep the hard edges, let's suppose that you are retopologizing a robot. Okay, you can select this, preserve hard edges, and the retopology is going to respect the hard edges. In this case, I don't want that. I want the opposite. Okay, so let's retopologize with 5000 faces. You will see that it takes a while to recalculate, and we will have the final result. You need polygons to capture the details. Okay, so in this case, I am happy with the final result. I kind of like this result, and we don't have to put that much of information right now, because we are going to cover some problems. So for example, there's a small problem here on this part, and I would like to have more information here. And yeah, if you want that, you can try to use again different settings, because for example, face uniformity like is 1, now is 1. So if you put like 0.8, you will see that the thing is going to recalculate. Again, it takes some time, doesn't give you any visual feedback that it's operating, but it's operating, is recalculating, and this is the result. And now I have a better result here on the corner. So this is the cool trick of using this type of tool. if you have less uniformity, you can have like compressed polygons on the corners, and this is not exactly a bad thing. This can be a very good thing. Okay, now that I have this thing, I'm going to finally delete the history, freeze the transformation, so everything is fine, and I can work on the ocean. To be able to create the oceans, I would like to show you something that is related with one of our first decisions, which was create the island on top of the grid. When we did that, so let's go to the side view, I would like to show you that. When we create the island on top of the grid, we put the mesh of the island, of course, align it with the grid, and I would like to make this mesh go down a little bit, and I'm going to pull the entire mesh around the island down, and I will put my ocean aligned with the grid. Okay, you don't have to do that. I will do that because I'm going to show you that doing this kind of thing, it's easier for us to hide parts of the object inside other mesh. So it's for aesthetics, just practical reasons. So if you double click on this edge, you are going to select the entire edge loop, and then I can activate the smooth, the soft selection, sorry. The soft selection is inside the move tool. If you double click on the move tool, you will see the soft selection here. And to activate or deactivate this option, you have to hit B on your keyboard, and you will activate or deactivate. And this colored thing that you're seeing here is exactly that. So we have this fall off, which is a radius of influence, and you can increase or decrease. And to that, on a dynamic way, you just have to hold B, click and drag with your mouse, left mouse button, and you can make it bigger or shorter. So the black parts are not going to be affected. The yellow parts are going to be very affected. The red part is going to be like the point where the changes you do, they kind of lose effect until we do not affect the rest. So basically it's that. If you try to move now, you will see what I mean. So it's just clicking and dragging, and you see that we are pushing those guys down, and I think I want more. So let's undo, let's hold B again and make this a little bit bigger, and then push down a little bit like so. And that is all. I think this is more than enough to have the ocean. Okay, I'm not going to see the bottom of the ocean and this kind of thing. So this works with move, scale, and rotate. So if you want to scale, for example, you can do this kind of thing with this soft selection activated. Okay, after you finish, remember to hold B to deactivate the tool. Okay, we can close this thing. We can start modeling the ocean. And to do the ocean, I'm going to do something very, very similar to what I did with the island. So I'm going to use a polydisc, because the polydisc by default have a very interesting topology. It's a rounded object, and I am fully inspired by dioramas. Diorama is a very interesting way to show a tiny piece of the world. So I don't care about the world, just this very tiny piece. And I'm going to make like a little bit bigger than the island, because again, it's a way to tell stories. I don't need to put a lot of information. So I'm going to save this file, because now I have to increase the amount of subdivisions on my ocean to the next step. Okay, and to do that, please be careful. Go to the subdivisions and increase slowly. So 5 is like this. So 5 is not enough. 6. 7 maybe. Oh, 7 is cool. And this is the limit. Please don't go far. Try to test your limits. Try to see what you can do. And after you reach a certain point, stop, because your machine is going to break if you force too much. Okay? So why do I have to increase the amount of polygons? So first of all, let me rename this thing. Ocean. I would like to introduce you to a very cool deformation a deformer actually, and we saw a few deformers so far. This one is one of my favorites. We can use a texture to drive deformations on an object. Okay, it's super cool. And to show you how this thing works, I would like to hide my island just for a second. So select the island, hit H to hide the island, select your ocean object, and I'm going also to freeze the transformations because we have transformations here because I scale the object, right? And we have history as well. So delete history, freeze transformations, and now I'm good to go. Save the file again. And you have to go to the animation tab and go to deform and then apply this guy here, which is a texture deformer. Okay. If you go to the options, you'll see that you don't have a lot of things to change, so you don't have to worry too much. Just click create and everything is fine. Right away, you will see that nothing happens, which is normal, by the way. Let's go to the attribute editor because this guy, you cannot access all the information here on your channel box. You have to go to the attribute editor in this case, because inside the attribute editor, we will have the ocean shape, the texture deformer, which is, by the way, the guy I just applied on my ocean mesh, okay? And this is where I would like to do the magic happen. So first of all, notice that if I select this object and I increase this number, nothing will happen, okay? So this is something 0 and 2. 2 is the strength of the deformation. But right now the deformation is black, so he's waiting for a texture that we can plug here, and this texture, the values of this texture are going to drive the deformation for us, okay? If you put white, you see right away that the whole mesh displaces from the origin, okay? This is the range of the deformation, okay? If you put this thing down a little bit, you will see that this range is a little less, bigger, but I like to start with 2. And the second thing I will do is I don't want to drive like values like this. Okay, I want to plug a texture here, and the best type of texture is always the black and white. Okay, so you can work with noise, you can work with any type of black and white values or black and white textures. Even the colorful textures, sometimes they work, sometimes not. So keep in mind that sometimes you will have limitations if you try to use a ramp, for example, with color. Okay, it might work or not work because this type of deformation looks for the black and white values and everything in between. Okay, so just for the sake of demonstration, if you click checker, you notice that I can create like a chocolate bar doing that. I am using a texture to drive the deformations. If I change the color slightly, you will see that I can change the deformation, and I am changing literally the mesh. As you can see here, I am literally deforming the mesh using a texture as an input. And as I said, you have the strength of this deformation. So for example, if you are trying to create an animation showing like a cake, baking a cake, you can try to play with this. This is one possible way of doing that. Okay, not the only, of course, but you can try to do that. So as I said, black and white works best for this kind of thing. So the two works for the difference between both, of course, and the gray areas. I don't want to use this texture. If you go back to the object and go to the texture deformer, if you see this thing here, one way to get rid of this is if you click on the property, right mouse button on the property, you can select break connections. If you do that, you unplug the texture, and now you have no texture controlling this guy. If you click again, I would like to see the application of another texture. In this case, I would like to use literally ocean. Okay, you just have to click once and you will see that, of course, nothing happens because, first of all, our values here are extremely gray, and that's why things are not showing. But if you go here to the wave height and put a crazy number like 20, you will see right away what I mean. And this texture, by the way, have a bunch of properties that try to emulate the behavior of real waves. And this is how we create waves in computer graphics. So every single software is capable of having this kind of thing, and I can tweak the values. And if I want to animate this thing, I just have to go here to the time and play with the time. As you can see, I can create animations if that's the case, okay? Just using this texture. So I think in this case, of course, I'm not going to animate. I want something static. I think this is way too big, okay? If I bring back my island, you will see what I mean by that. So I have like way too much deformation. Of course, if you really like to see the waves around, like very agitated, you can go here and you can use the sculpt tools that we already saw, and we can change just this part. But at the same time, I'm seeing a lot of depressions here, a lot of spaces that I don't want to see, and I'm not sure about that. You can, of course, you can go back to the texture, to the ocean texture. I give the same name to the object, ocean with big O on the beginning, but the texture is called ocean with, you know, small caps. So in this case, you can work on the turbulence. So for example, you can have like really crazy values. Of course, this is way too much. Let me go back to 1. You can wave picking, you can number of frequencies, for example, from 3 to 5, and you have even more frequency. And I'm going to decrease this number a little bit, so 40 probably. It's better because again, I want the deformation, but I don't want something crazy. I want something that helps to tell the story, but it doesn't need to be like very exaggerated. Something like this is okay. Now we just have to fix the problems here, but we still have the texture driving the deformations of the object. Okay, so if you delete this guy here, what is going on is you are going to lose everything, and I bet you don't want to do that. So in this case, I'm going to hit Z to undo, and the way to get rid of the deformation, actually any deformation inside Maya, is deleting the history. If you delete the history, you keep the changes and you get rid of the dependency of this guy. So delete history. As you can see, now I have the shape and I have absolutely nothing driving this guy. And the best part is I can go there, I can select my sculpting tools, okay? And I can activate the sculpting tools. If you double click, you see like, if you reset, you see like the original values, of course. And you holding control, you can click to push those points inside. Of course, the tool is super strong. I don't know if you can see this thing here. Let's undo a little bit, because my point here is I want just to get rid of these interferences on the mesh, but I don't want to destroy everything. Another way to do that, if you don't want to use the sculpting tools, okay, you can use if you want. If you don't want to use the sculpting tools, another way to do that is, guess, using the, if you double click here, using the soft selection tool. Okay, in this case it's even easier if you think about it. You just have to go to vertices or faces, that doesn't matter. Okay, you just have to select one component. In this case, I can activate the tool, hold shift to make like a bigger radius of influence, click and drag down, and everything is fine. Okay, so I just have to put this down, and this is the final result. If you want to keep this thing out of the way on this part, you can do so. If you want to make it, if you want to bring up, you can do the same thing. Okay, if you think that this is way too much of influence, you can decrease or increase the radius of influence, like so. And That's it. So I'm just making very tiny, smaller adjustments because I want this cool transition between the ocean and the beach, of course. Be careful, because if you have like objects going up, this can be a little bit tricky. Try to adjust the radius just a little bit to have like a smaller radius of influence. And if you want, and if you think this is enough, you can keep. If you think that you need more deformations, you can apply the texture again, and if you do so, you will have a different pattern, and use this pattern to drive your deformations on the mesh, and you just have to delete the history of the mesh. Okay, another option, after you finish, if you think that, of course, if you do that, you're going to lose a little bit of deformation, so you can choose to keep or change if you want. But if you want, you can go back to the modeling tool, go to mesh, retopologize, and we can try to retopologize this mesh a little bit. So click retopologize with the default settings. This is my recommendation. Okay, and then you can go to the channel box, and you can see how Maya deals with this retopologing process. Pay attention to that. It's taking longer because now my mesh is very dense and there is a lot of details on the mesh. As you can see, it's taking a lot of time, but he is remeshing the entire object, and I will have the starting point after he finished. And right away you can notice that, okay, I have some deformation. I don't have a lot of deformation. I might need more polygons, and you can adjust this here. Okay, but pay attention. The time we took, I'm not cutting this video because I would like to show you the whole process. So in this case, you can increase this thing to 5,000, and you have to wait. Okay, after Maya finish, he's going to show you the result, but there is nothing in between showing like the process of retopologizing or recalculating things. So sometimes this tool is extremely slow, but this is the nature of the tool. So we have to play with the face count, we have to play with the face uniformity, we have to play with the topology regularity to achieve a good result at the end. Okay, and this is a back and forth process. There's nothing we can do unless wait until it finish, and looks like Maya is going to freeze. But again, it's just take time to finish. As you can see, it took longer. It's almost a minute to do that. And I don't like, for example, the face uniformity is close to 0. In this case, you can put 1. And it's going to recalculate once more. But we will have less weirdness with the meshes. So for example, here we have this huge face, and we have this very tiny smaller face, and we have like strips as well. So if you increase this face uniformity to 1, Maya is going to recalculate everything. It's going to kind of force everything to be squarish, I would say, with the same type of topology. And the result is going to be a little bit better. But again, it takes time, and then finished. Yeah, and right away you can see we kind of capture the details having less geometry, and this is the point of applying this process. You can have a lot of details without having necessarily a lot of polygons. Now that we have the terrain in the ocean ready, I would like to stop this video here because it's already very long, but I've been very carefully in giving you all the information, all the techniques, all the tools without stopping the video and doing everything in real time. Okay. The next video I will start talking about the lighthouse, the house itself. I didn't decide if I want to do both in just one single object, or like a lighthouse with house attached, or if I'm going to do both separate objects. To be very honest, I don't know yet, but I will try to decide later because again, it's a very stylized project. I don't have to worry about the relationship of this thing in the real world. After that, we are going to model trees, stones, a pier, and a boat. So those things, they seem very complicated, and that's why I decided to separate the video into two parts to make our lives a little bit easier. But these are all related with the first video I promised. So separating in two videos makes my life a little bit easier, but this is just a detail. Okay, we don't have to worry about that. You can follow me so far and build the terrain and the ocean and try to reproduce the same techniques. And I see you in the next video.